it's Nancy at Sipping and Painting Hampden. And today we're going to paint this beautiful painting called City Reflection. And this particular painting was done by someone who used to work here years ago named Tony Alexander. And I am not exactly sure what city this is that Tony referenced in this painting, but you can paint any city into it that you like. And so what I think I might do is I might put Denver in mine. Keep in mind that this is water down here, but it could be that there is a lakefront or a riverfront or ocean front. It could also be wet pavement. So by those standards, it could be any city in the world. And so just kind of keep that in mind. You might want to just think about what city it is that you want to paint. I'm going to go ahead and make it Denver since that's where we are. But if you want to copy it exactly the way it is, feel free. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover my canvas with water because Denver is so dry. And that helps our paint just move more smoothly across the canvas. Let me switch those. That makes more sense. All right. And so we're just going to cover it with water so that the paint moves more smoothly across the canvas when we do paint. And anytime that the canvas starts to feel dry or the paint is not moving smoothly, you can always add a drop of water to your paints and mix that in, and that will help them move a little more smoothly. Acrylic paints can come in a variety of different textures and densities, anywhere from like toothpaste kind of texture in a metal tube to could be a liquid. I like to use mine about the consistency of yogurt. And so if yours are thicker than that, you can always add a little bit of water, stir it in. But that seems to be a good texture for it moving across the canvas. But that's a matter of personal preference also. I'm going to be using a large flat brush, a medium flat brush, and a small round. I also have some water in a jar. I have some napkins, and I have my apron on. That's really important. And so, all right, here we go. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put on this bottom black part. And what I want you to notice is that this horizon line is not halfway up the canvas. It is below. And the reason for that is anytime you're painting a landscape, whether it's a natural landscape or a cityscape, it's best to either start the horizon higher than midline or lower than midline. So this one is a little lower than midline, and that way your eye doesn't have to go, I don't know what to look at, I'm a little confused here. So that's a good idea no matter what you're painting in a landscape. Okay. And when I say in a landscape, obviously it'd be different in a portrait. Okay, so we're going to paint the bottom. It looks like about 40% in black, and then the top we're going to do in straight on blue. So we could do either first, it doesn't matter. I can pick up my black and draw a line about 40% of the way across, 40% of the way up. So you'll see if I hold my hand like that, this is a lot larger. So that's about 40%, that's about 60%. And it doesn't matter which one I do first. I could do black first down here, or I could do the blue first. It really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to put that on. I'm pulling it horizontally, being careful not to get paint in my tea. I'm enjoying hot tea tonight. I might switch to wine. Hope you have a beverage so you can relax and enjoy the painting. Yeah. And so I'm just going to cover the bottom of our painting with black. And then I'm also going to paint the very bottom of it. That's called a gallery wrap. When you paint the tops and the sides and the bottom, that's called a gallery wrap. And the reason you would do that is so that you don't have to hang it in a frame. You can just hang it straight on the wall because it has finished edges. That's a personal preference. If you want to put it in a frame, you still can. You can paint it all the way around and then still decide later to put it in a frame. So that's a personal preference. I like to paint the sides so that way I can do it either way. If you don't paint the sides, you'll have kind of a rougher edge, and then it really begs for a frame. So once I have I'm going to go ahead and tell you this part, but I know you're not as far as I am, okay? Obviously, this is horizontal, in the horizontal direction. I am not going to pick up any more black paint, but there is still some on my brush. So what I can do is I can just darken the corners up here with what's left over on my brush. I didn't pick up any more, but I can just darken the corners with what's left. And the reason I'm doing that is when I put on blue, I just want the corners to be good and dark. And I'll do that to the other side as well. And the reason I want it to be good and dark is that way the buildings will really pop and the reflections will really pop. So I didn't pick up any more paint. I'm just using what's left on my brush. And there's so little left now, it's like a dry brush. I figure I might as well make the corners dark because then my paintings will, my city will really just pop. If you have a lot of leftover paint, don't use it all. You can just stop, but don't pick up any more for that corner thing, okay? And then I'm going to clean my brush. I like to clean my brush a lot because then I don't have to waste a lot of napkins. I can just take my brush out of the water after I've swished it just a ton. Then when I use my napkin and just dab it on my napkin, I'm not wasting a lot of napkins. My napkin just really absorbs the clean water. I like to conserve. I put mine a little bit high, but just so long as it's not exactly halfway. And then I'm going to do the rest of the top in blue, including the top of the canvas up here and the sides over here. Deb, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute or just feel free to unmute and visit. If it's relatively quiet at your house, the recording will be fine. If it's noise, if you're playing music or watching TV or something, then I do ask that you stay muted, but otherwise feel free to unmute.
Well, I have some music going, so if that gets too loud, I can turn it down.
Oh, you know what? It's not about loud or soft. It's that on YouTube, I can't put a recording that has music in it.
Oh, okay.
Because copyright violation. So it's fine that you listen to it. In fact, I'm thrilled that you are. That's great because your painting will be more pleasant and yeah, you'll be more relaxed if you listen to music. But just keep it on mute, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I wish I could be listening to music right now, but when I put it on YouTube, I get this warning that I've done a copyright violation and they want to take it down, so couldn't do that anymore. Which I understand and respect as an artist. They want their money too. And I'm just going right over that dark area with my blue, and it's just, it was half set anyway, but now it's just kind of mixing in. And I'm just using straight on blue for the top. I didn't mix it with white or anything. It's just straight on blue. If you want it lighter, you can paint it lighter. I think that the reflections stand out more if you just use solid blue for the top. And I'm taking it right on down to that black line. Later, after we put on our buildings, we'll clean up the line. So it doesn't really matter exactly what it looks like right here. You'll see that my painting is still really wet, and I don't expect you to be this far yet, but if you want to, you can take a clean medium brush when you are done, and then I'm going to dip it in a little bit of white, but not too much. I'm going to knock off any excess, and I'm just going to put in a few little light blue clouds, and I don't have to mix it into light blue because it's already mixing with my wet paint. I'm just putting in a little bit of cloud action with some streaks, and I don't have to mix anything because this is just mixing naturally with my blue paint. And it's just more in the center area, and it's just putting in a little cloudiness in my sky, a little texture in my sky. And I'm not making, cotton ball shaped clouds or anything. I'm just using a little bit of that white to just kind of streak in a little light here and there. Not a ton.
You went to a medium brush?
Yeah, I use a medium brush for that.
Okay.
But if you want to use a large, it's really up to you. It's just adding a little texture, a little lightness to suggest some faraway clouds. And I don't mean to rush you. Take your time with all this, but I wanted to show you that while the blue was still a little wet. And that way you don't have to mix blue and white to be light blue. You can just take advantage of the fact that it was still a little wet. I hope that makes sense. Yes. Or you can wait till all of the background is dry and then streak it on as a light blue. That works too. The creaky chair. If you hear that noise, that's my chair, honest. And this is water. Looks like on this one, they put a little bit of black up here too. So I'm gonna put a little bit of black up in here. Very lightly. That's it. I had cleaned my brush and dried it on the napkin. And then by just painting over the really wet looking spots with a dry brush, kind of flattens it and it helps it dry a little quicker. But you have to be careful not to blend away everything that you put in, the texture that you put in when you do that. But I don't think I did.
It looks like there's a little green in the sky too. Are we gonna add that
Yeah,
later
actually,
or?
Yeah, actually, I just didn't want to give you too much when you were still catching up on all this.
Okay.
So we'll do that next. You are ahead of the game. All right, so I'm going to, it's already blue, and yellow is a pretty transparent color. It's not opaque. It's more, I guess, not transparent, translucent. And so I can try to get that green by just picking up a little yellow on my brush and see if that'll work. If it shows up too yellow, I'll need to mix some and put it over it. But I think if I just do yellow and then brush that in, I think I'm going to get some little bit of green without, yeah, there we go. And it's just a little bit here and there. I think this is just reflected light from the, who knows where. Maybe there's an airport nearby, maybe, who knows? We don't really know, but in a city, you have all kinds of reflected light. I know when I drive at night, if I'm anywhere near a used car lot, there is just, or a hospital or someplace that has to have its parking lots lit up, there is just lights everywhere. There are just lights everywhere. So that's all that is. Just a little bit of yellow streaked in, just for a little more texture, a little more reflected light. And then I'm just going to brush. I'm using my brush like a dry brush. I don't have any paint on it, just kind of making sure that green is blended in, but not too much. I still want to be able to see it. Looks like that white's a little brighter on that side. It's nice while it's still a little wet, you can blend things in without having to mix it on your plate when it's wet. As soon as it's dry, that stops. Oh, oops. I accidentally picked up some yellow instead of some white. Everything's fixable with acrylic paint. I can roll up a napkin, and while it's wet, I can blot it off. I'm really not adding any more paint. I'm just brushing what's already there now. Just kind of blending in that little bit that I added up here. We do want to let these dry. So it's once you add the little highlights of blue or green onto the sky, let's let that dry so that when we put in our buildings, they won't smear. It's okay if they smear down in the water, but we don't want them to smear horizontally. So we're just going to let that dry. And you'll know when it's dry, when it has a matte appearance that's like a chalkboard that's not shiny. That's matte, and you can see here it's wet. That is shiny. There are 3 ways to know if a painting is wet that I know of. One is to look at it in different light and see if it glistens. If it glistens like that, it's wet. And here, obviously, it's not. Also, you can feel on the back of the canvas where it's wet. It's a little cooler to the touch. I don't know by how many degrees. Maybe it's just a degree, but you can feel it. There's a difference. It's warmer where it's dry. And then the third way is to rub it on someone in your home, some unsuspecting victim. And when they scream, you'll know it was wet, but I don't recommend that one. So I can tell by looking at my camera that this is a similar color. The background's a similar color to what I had before. But if you're not sure, you know, stand back about 5 feet and look at your painting from a distance. And I know you've probably heard me say this before, but I'm going to go ahead and say it again for anyone who watches on YouTube that hasn't heard me say this before. You always want to make sure that your painting looks good from about 5 feet away, because that's going to be the proper viewing distance. The paintings that we do are not hyper realistic. They're pretty impressionistic. I mean, we do them in 2 hours, and so they're not very highly detailed, and usually. So we want to make sure they look good from about 5 feet away. Impressionistic paintings do look better from a little bit of a distance. And like I said, we're going to come in and we're going to clean up this water line later. So it doesn't really matter if there's a straight line there. We'll fix that later. At the end, we'll clean it up. But standing back and just looking from about 5 feet away is a really good distance, 5 to 10, however far you can get in the room that you're in. So we're just going to let this dry a little bit more, but mostly if it's mostly dry right in here, we can at least start mixing some colors and then put some buildings where it's dry. But what I want to show you is that there's different colors to these buildings.
Oh.
So this one is like a straight on gray. It would be made with half black and half white. And then this one is a bluish gray. So it's gray with some blue added. This one's a charcoal gray. It's mostly black with just a little bit of white. This one's solid black. This one's solid black. And those are all the variety. So it's 4 things. It's a straight on gray, a charcoal gray, which is just a real dark gray, a bluish gray, or a black. And then they just kind of alternate. And then the window colors are different too. We're not even going to think about windows yet. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint buildings in one of these 4 different shades of gray. We have the light gray. We have a bluish tinted gray. We have a dark gray, and we have a black. Oh, and there's a solid blue one here too. So basically it's just different shades of gray, and some of them we add a little bit of blue to it. And by having that variety of grays, from really light gray to dark gray to black, and then some with a little blue added in, then we get this wide variety of look of the buildings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush. First, I'll make some light gray. I'm going to use a little, I'm just taking my medium flat brush. I'm going to add a little white paint to a little black paint. That'll be my first gray. And I don't need a lot of any of these. And so then I'm going to take a little bit more, I'm in black and a little less white, and make a very dark gray. I'm going to make that next to it because I can. So I have a light gray and a dark gray. Then I can take a little more white, a little more black, and then add a little blue to it. So then I can get a blue gray. And basically, just so long as I have 4 different shades, that's all I need. You can mix them all now, or you can mix them as you go. But just, you know, so we're on the same page about, we just need a variety in the shades of gray. And we're not going to pay much attention to exactly where this line is because we're going to clean it up later. But the general idea is we're going to kind of know where our horizon line is. If you can't see yours anymore, you could repaint it on again if that helps you. Mine kind of disappeared when I was putting on the blue, but at least I'll get an idea this way. Just put a little more on top of my black, just so I know. But then here's the thing about making the buildings. We're gonna just cover the skyline back and forth with the buildings. We just want to make sure that each one is a different shape, a different height and different width than the one next to it, unless we deliberately make 2 of them the twin towers. That's an option. But in general, we're just going to pick a height and a width and go with it for that building. And then when we put on the next building, just so long as it's not exactly the same. Like I said, unless you're making twin towers of, you know, deliberately, I mean. So I have a rectangle there. It's kind of hard to see, but that's dark. And now I can go in with a lighter one next to it. I want to change the color and I want to change the shape. Now this is a medium brush that I'm using right now because I want you to be able to see it. But if it's easier to use a small flat brush or a small round brush, use what feels good in your hand. I would say if you're having trouble making it a good rectangle, then just go down to a smaller brush. And we want to, in general, vary the size and the shape of the buildings. And I'm just going to kind of do them randomly. Oops. I'm going to have a bigger one near the center because that will bring my eye closer to the center if I have one that's bigger than the others. But this will just kind of take us a while just to make some buildings. And if you have a skyline in mind that you want to duplicate, you can pull that up on your phone or iPad or something to duplicate it. I'm not going to, but it's just personal preference. And so, and then you can also put them right next to each other so they overlap like that. Or you can put a space between them so that there's a street or an alley. Again, that's your personal preference. Sometimes when we paint a skyline in here, we just pile them one on top of another. And then sometimes we put spaces in between, you can see. but it really just depends on you and the city that you're thinking about and how big the city is. You know, Boise is not going to be as compact and have buildings piled on top of buildings as Manhattan. We're going to cover the bottom with this, we're going to call it a boardwalk. I really don't know what that is. It could be a sidewalk. It could be a pier. We just don't know. But whatever that is, we're going to put that there and then I'll clean it up. A little challenging to make them different sizes and shapes.
It is.
We're going to try. I'm having more luck with a little smaller brush, but like I said, it's personal preference. So here's the key to making any city that is iconic, that has iconic buildings. First, you just paint a bunch of buildings like this that are rectangles, and then you go back and put the tops on. Like, for example, I'm going to find one of these that looks like it would be a good one for the cash register building in Denver, and then I'll put on that top. And then I'll find another one that'll look like the condos that have that weird angled top, and put that on. And it won't be deliberate. Like, I don't really know what streets are here or where these are in relation to each other, but we'll just put on some iconic tops. And when you do it that way, when people are looking at, do I know that city? They only think about the top, usually. Mm-hmm. Unless it's like a Coliseum or something that has a unique shape. But in general, if you put on a top that is familiar to people, that's a pretty good, an easy way to do it. It's easy unless your city is Emerald City. This one's a lot easier than that one. Just every so often, take a look at the whole thing that you're doing and ask yourself, am I doing different heights? Am I doing different widths? Am I making some overlap with others and some have spaces in between? Am I varying the colors? I forgot to tell you in the beginning, you know, you're always welcome to change any painting you want. You know, if I'm doing these in shades of gray, but if you want to do them like a red one and a blue one and a yellow one, you know, do what makes you feel good. This is your painting, your world. If you want to paint Godzilla walking down the street, or King Kong on the top, or Batman signal, do whatever you like. It's fun to make them all piled up next to each other. We just have to remember that whatever we paint, we're going to have to do a reflection down below, which is not hard. It's easy, but yeah, the more buildings, well, the reflections are pretty non-specific, so that really shouldn't be a problem. I put a little house in the middle of downtown. I don't know why, but I felt like it. Feel free to change the tops however you want it to do them. I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the iconic Denver tops, but if you're not doing Denver, I'll just go ahead and say it for my own benefit. So I'm going to turn, I think I'm going to turn this one into the cash register building because it's nice and tall. And the cash register building is the most iconic building in Denver, and it's nice and tall. And basically for the cash register building, you start by taking a thin round brush, a round brush, and then I'm knocking off some clumps on the side of my plate. Probably be better if I use a smaller brush. Let me do that first. I'm going to outline it first. All right. And then right from the center, I'm going to make a dot, and then I'm going to pull up, well, I don't know, on this particular one, about an inch. But it just depends on the size of your building. And then from the top, maybe a little higher. Yeah, a little higher. From the top of it, you curve backward and down to meet the side. And so it's got a straight side here, but then the other side is curved down. And then from the center point of that line that's stuck up, then you curve down here so that it looks like a cash register, an old-fashioned cash register. So when we get kids in here and they're painting the skyline, I say a cash register, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Right. I have to pull out my iPad and show them. When your mom and grandma were little, this is what it looked like. This was a cash register. And your parents and your grandparents. And I feel so old when I say that. Yeah. Especially since to them, the cash register is the iPad that I'm showing at them. The younger kids think it looks more like a trash can at McDonald's at the airport. There is another odd shaped building in Denver, and I'll show you that one too. It's some kind of condo, and I'm not really sure how tall it is. I don't remember, but it has this very iconic top. So I'm going to go with this one because why not? And basically, it just has a curve like a banana, and it just comes down like that.
Huh.
And then I fill that in. Not really skinny like a banana, a little fatter than a banana, but just has this odd.
Never noticed it.
Beret or something off the side. It's just an odd shaped building. It looks like a former president's hair, basically. The silhouette. It's a bad hairdo is what it is. And then I like to add just kind of a few random, buildings that have like little antennas on top. Might have one or two. Or maybe they have a little rotunda at the top that just looks like a little hat box. There's an old-fashioned word for you. Like a stack. And we don't know where those are or what they are. We just kind of make them up. Some could be white, some could be red, whatever you think. Because maybe they have lights in them. Maybe it's a radio station. Who knows? Let me know when you're ready to talk windows, okay?
Not even yet.
Whenever that is, no hurry. And one thing that makes it easier is if you take your pinky and use it as a stabilizer for your hand. So my pinky, I'm taking my dry pinky and I can touch it on the canvas and then use it to stabilize these fingers. That can be a real help.
Okay, whenever you want to talk windows, I will listen to windows.
I also want to say if it's easier to get those fine lines, it's hard to paint straight lines. It's really hard. I don't know anyone who can paint straight lines easily, but if it helps, besides that pinky trick, you can also pick up the painting and turn it upside down so that you can get at it more easily. Or, you know, any direction that works for you. I was just noticing online that they painted Cinderella's castle, and now it has at Disney World, and now it has really bright, like purple parts to it. It used to be, I think it used to be like gray and or lavender and pink or something, but now it's much bolder.
All right.
Now, our whole painting looks very dark right now, but in a few minutes with all this reflected light, it's gonna, and all these windows, it is gonna pop and you won't even notice the darkness in the background. So I'm just going to tell you about the windows. If you were to paint real individual windows in this painting, it would take you about a month probably, and a very fine brush, right? So that's not very practical. But what does work well is just to take a very small, like a fine round brush, and then just paint lines of windows. And just, I'm holding my my canvas steady, putting my pinky so to anchor my hand a little bit, and then just lines of windows work really well. But remember this when you're putting on the windows. This is nighttime, and so most of those buildings aren't lit up, you know, completely like it would be during the day. So I like to just alternate floors maybe, and just know that some of those windows, maybe someone's working late, or maybe someone lives there, or maybe they're just being cleaned, but a lot of the windows are also dark. So you don't have to put in every single window in the whole building. It'll still look great if you just, you know, alternate. And then I like to alternate the direction of the windows too, because I'm figuring some of the bosses are going to have big corner, you know, windows, and some of these are the worker bees, maybe they have small windows, and maybe they're floors with no windows, because those are the people like me that would go in there. I get a window probably. And then so some of them are going to be white, and then some of them, if you add a little bit of white to your yellow, so I add a little bit of white to my yellow just to make my yellow stand out more, because yellow is a little more translucent, right? And white is very opaque. And what that means is that there's more pigment in white. So if you add a little white to your yellow will just show up better against dark. And so I can put some of those yellow windows on as well. And then they even, in this painting, they even have, not a lot, but just a few places where there's red windows. You could do any color you want. You could do white and blue. I wouldn't make it, you know, every color in the rainbow. I mean, you could if you want to, but I'm not sure how realistic that would look. But the general idea is there's yellow light, there's white light, and maybe even a little red light. And so you decide, and then also vary the size and the shape of the windows if you want to. Maybe some buildings, they're all the windows look the same. We don't know. Maybe some are more lit up near the street, while others are more lit up near the top. Maybe some have a huge window. Those big sightseeing windows. On the conference room floor, who knows? Just kind of mixing it up. And I used to worry about, oh, is my hand straight enough? And am I making these windows perfectly straight? But then I remembered, some of the windows are blocked by, one window could be blocked by some plants or curtains or people. And so if your windows are not perfectly shaped, that's more realistic anyway. I don't know what that is. It might be a circus tent for all I know. The circus came to town in that little building. Normally in a painting, we put a little, some stars. This painting doesn't have any stars, but you're always welcome to put them in if you want. If you did decide, normally I just use the stick, and then I just pop on a few And then dark areas might be kind of nice, but maybe it's not, maybe it's a more overcast night and there aren't any stars. I'm going to put on just a few in mine in the upper part. I just want to tell you, I'm not going to take my time and do this, but I will tell you in this one, if you want to do it later, you can. But in this one, she outlined it with black on the sides. It does make them pop a little more with contrast. Another thing that you could do, and I really don't want to do this now, but I'll just show you because I want to show you the bottom part, okay? If you really wanted later, you could come along and neaten up the sides of the building. And I would say some of them, oops, maybe there's a white side and maybe a black side, or a shade different than the than what you chose for the building. It does make them stand out a little bit more. To me, what would make sense to me is to pick one side that's the highlight side and one side that's the shadow side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because rather than just all black, because to me, the downtown is going to have, the more downtown it is, it's going to have more light, right? So there would be a shadow side and a highlight side. But this is getting really picky. That's the advanced class. And I don't know that I want to be the advanced class personally. I think it's kind of nice to, if it's good, leave it alone. But you can decide that, okay? If you want to go back in later and add a little more definition, you know, by either putting black lines on either side or, you know, white lines for highlights, feel free. It's a little more detail than I want to do. But if that's what you want to do, knock yourself out, okay?
Okay.
Can I go ahead and show you these?
Sure, I'm ready.
Okay, even if you're not ready, I'll just show you. The general idea is I'm going to take the biggest, flattest, big flat brush, and I'm going to pull down the shadows of the windows, basically. So I have a little yellow on this brush, a little white for this little house, right? And I'm just going to pull down like that. And I'm going to look for more, but I'm going to try to make them shorter for the short houses or buildings and longer for the tall ones. That would just make sense, right? That the taller, and we can start up here and then neaten them up later, but the taller the building, the longer the shadow or the highlight, the reflection. So I can just go through with my big brush and pull down, you know, some yellow. And it doesn't have to be neat or perfect or anything, but then there's also other colors. So let's say I see some red on that one, I can pull down a little red. And I'm going to exaggerate all the colors. So on that one, that has blue. So I can pick up some blue on my brush and pull that down. So that way we're getting a big variety of color and just pulling down just kind of the ballpark of where that color would be. And I'm not even cleaning my brush in between. You can if you want to. If you want to make it really, you know, more perfect, please, by all means, but I'm not going to. I just want to have all the different colors that I see represented in the reflections. And then in general, the taller the building, the taller the building, the longer the reflection. Did any of what I just said make any sense?
It did.
Good, okay. But it's not at all fussy. It's not at all fussy. I think that's the beauty of the painting is it's not fussy. No one's really going to measure, hey, you know what? I didn't see green in your original paintings, and that reflection's a little longer than it should be. No one's going to do that. They're just going to see all the colors and think it's pretty. And I like having the colors in my brush, but I want to just be careful and not put on too much paint or I'm going to get brown. Right? So I'm going to have to use a little bit of common sense to not mix a whole like big wads of color. I'll just get brown. There's orange in this painting too, which I think is really nice. It sets apart the blue on the top. And so if you can figure out a way to add a little orange in yours, I think the orange is really nice. I don't know what you think, but
I do like it.
yeah. I'm just going to try to find a place where it would make a little bit of sense. And maybe it doesn't have to make any sense.
Not really. Now,
I think the key is, and I'm going to have to tell myself this, don't go over the same thing with different colors because then you might get brown. Brown, as you probably know, is, it's red plus yellow plus blue. And so not cleaning the brush in between works as long as you're not constantly going back and forth with piles of paint. If it's thin, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you put it on thinly enough that it dries right away, then it's not going to mix. But if you're putting on a lot of paint, you're going back and forth between colors, then it never really, then it mixes, and that's not good. Then you get a lot of brown. If your colors are getting dull or coming, turning brown, then definitely clean your brushes in between. And that should help brighten things up a bit. I actually added a couple of buildings in mine just so I can have some more reflections. When you're finished with your reflections, and it's really hard to stop. I really don't want to stop mine because I love it. It's so fun. But when you are finished, I'll show you how. We're just going to add some really delicate water lines. And I'll show you how to do that. Basically, to make some really delicate water lines, all you do is take a little water and the tiniest amount of white, like the size of the top of a pan of white, and mix it with some water. So you just have dirty water. And then just a few strokes back and forth like that, just to mess it up. But this is going to dry, and it's just messing it up a little bit, just so that it looks like this is actually in water. It's just smearing it a tiny bit, but you have to use such a tiny amount of white that it's practically all water. If your reflections are really wet, then you could do it without any white. You could just, it's just smearing it a little bit, just so that that's the water, the effect that the water would have on the reflections. But it's easy to overdo that. So don't have your brush really wet, okay? You can see up close what that does. The last step is just to take your brush, and you could use, depending on the size of your brush, as a medium or a large flat brush, and then just make a solid line of black across, and that just neatens up the bottom of the buildings and brings the reflections in line. And again, it's like either a boardwalk or a river walk or who knows. But it does just kind of neaten it up, and then we can add some white dots there. So maybe it's a riverfront. And so I can use the bottom of my stick for this. And then I'm just going to pop on some lights. And you could put them randomly, or you could put them in a order, whatever you want. To me, it seems like if you have a river walk, you would have lamps. The city has any money for that kind of thing? Hopefully they do. They did theirs very randomly. I'm just doing dots across, but whatever you want. Because in my mind, it's like a pathway. Could be that that's a road and headlights. So, you know, if you want to mix it up and make them more random, you could do that still. I really don't know what they are, so. You gotta make some big decisions, I guess. When you're finished, just go ahead and sign your name in the bottom right-hand corner or wherever you want. Once again, so that when I see your painting in the Denver Art Museum, well, I know her. Anyway, it was fun painting with you and nice to see you again.